Story 1. Okay, this is about me. When I was a child, I was severely and intentionally neglected. We were not allowed to use the restroom on our own because we might drink water from the sink when we washed our hands. Not allowing water was one of the forms of control. So we had to ask so she could watch to make sure we did not drink anything. Every time we asked, my mother was always very mean about it. My brothers and I found unique ways of going to the bathroom, such as peeing down the vent in the laundry room sink or in the closet. I would also get kidney infections because I regularly held it until I really could not anymore. We were always too scared to ask. Unfortunately, this behavior did not stop for me when I was removed from the house. I continued to be very scared of going to the bathroom if other people were near, especially at night. I would be too scared to get up and go. I lived with a roommate. She had the top floor with the bathroom and I had the basement. It had a laundry room sink. You can guess what occurred. I would rinse the sink, but somehow it still had a bit of a smell. Of course, she was pregnant and could smell it much better than I could. She mentioned cleaning the sink, and I felt so ashamed. Luckily, I do not do that anymore. Maybe one time since living there because of a severe mental breakdown. Trauma causes some strange things. I cannot live with people around whom I do not feel completely safe. I have always meant to write a book about my life. I went through some pretty horrific things growing up, and it has greatly impacted the way I grew up, both good and bad. I did not think many people would be interested, but the response to this post seems otherwise. Maybe I will start with a blog. Story 2. Similar to the family poop knife, I knew an old man who would have massive bowel movements, sometimes so large that they would not flush. His solution was to use a litter scooper to move the waste outdoors. He did not openly share this information with me at first. I just happened to be at his house one day and asked, "Is that feces next to your porch?" Story 3. I knew a guy in the army who would go to Walmart, buy the cheapest women's underwear, and wear them during morning physical training and gym. He said he would even use the bathroom without wiping just to get them dirty and smelly. Then he would pose as a woman online, and older men would pay him anywhere from $50 to $500 a pair. These men thought they were smelling a woman's sweaty clothing, but were actually smelling a man's. Story 4. When I was in the Navy, I worked with a man who refused to take showers. The only way he would take one was if enough people complained and someone who outranked him ordered him to do so. He would wear the same clothes for days on end. When I asked him why he did not take showers, he told me, "I just don't think I smell that bad, so I don't bother." Mind you, we were cooks, and out of everyone on the ship, we had to maintain the best hygiene. We worked long, exhausting hours and were bone tired at the end of the day. But no matter how tired I was, I always made time for a shower. However, this man was just averse to showers. Another man earlier on got kicked out, and when they were cleaning out his bed after he left, they found a large black rubber object with a fist on it that still had stains on it. I also knew another man who hung his dirty sock above his pillow for all to see. You could literally see how crusty it was, and after a while it was almost impossible to ignore the smell. Story 5. I knew a guy who said he used to wipe his semen on the wall of his bedroom after he masturbated. Story 6. The one positive thing about reading this thread is knowing that I am not as weird as I make myself out to be. Story 7. As an example of a fun fact, my boss shared with everyone that she makes her bed every day but only washes her sheets once or twice a year. It was not fun. I think she realized she made a mistake when she heard all of us react. Some of us tried to follow up on this. She never improved. Story 8. Working at a bar 25 years ago, a coworker told me he had masturbated in the women's bathroom and smeared bodily fluids on the door handles. He said he fantasized at home about how many women touched it that night. He did this for over a year. I felt sick and reported him, which led to his dismissal that day. He is now a high school teacher. I still wonder if bathroom door handles are being affected. Story 9. In college, I caught one of my roommates using my toothbrush. When I looked aghast, she said, "Oh, you are one of those people?" Story 10. I knew a man who regularly wore diapers. He did not have any medical conditions that would require him to do so. He would frequently relieve himself around others and would refuse to change the diaper afterward. He stored the used diapers in his room, filling multiple trash bags, because he was too embarrassed to dispose of them in the dumpster. Story 11. A man on my first boat used to ejaculate on his belly, then pull the waistband of his underwear up and wipe it into his shorts. Then he would just carry on with his day, underwear all stained. Story 12. My mother has an interesting friend who openly admits that he lets his dogs hump his feet. He puts a cloth on his feet, dedicated to his dogs, and lets them hump between his toes until they finish. I shudder at the thought. Story 13. Just reading through all of this makes me wonder about people I know or work with who do strange things, and I just do not know about it yet. Story 14. There was a kid on the wrestling team at our school who said he was not taking showers. He was not bragging or being obnoxious, just mentioned it a couple of times. He did not take showers for weeks at a time. Almost everyone on the wrestling team complained about how bad he smelled, and nobody wanted to wrestle with him. It got so bad that he was kicked off the team because he was so dirty he was giving other kids some kind of skin infection just by being in contact with him. Gross. Story 15. An old friend of mine once told us that he masturbates while having a bowel movement. He said it gives twice the pleasure. Another friend hearing this immediately said it is true. Story 16. One of my friends caught a sexually transmitted infection from a toilet seat and said he regularly urinates into toilet paper in his hands so he can see what comes out. I don't share food and drink with him anymore. Also, while on a road trip with my grandfather, I watched him take out a resealable plastic bag, urinate in it, seal it, and toss it out the window onto the highway. I did not have a problem with him urinating in a container. My problem was that it was a flimsy plastic sandwich bag. Story 17. He would reach into the toilet with his bare hands and remove the waste streaks from the walls of the toilet after using it. He liked a squeaky clean toilet. Then he would wash his hands, of course. But still. Story 18. I know a woman who had a broken toilet, but because of her hoarding, she did not let anyone else into her home. She coped for months by using plastic bags. Story 19. An ex-friend of mine at college had poor hygiene. I noticed my mouthwash was being used up quickly. Turned out she used it every day instead of brushing her teeth. She also never showered unless a boy was staying over with her. Her room smelled unpleasant. Story 20. I worked with a man in his mid-20s who had a room at his parents' house. He kept complaining about how his mother was always on him to clean his room because the smell was spreading into the hallway. I told him, then just clean the room. How bad could it be? He proceeded to tell me about the handful of urine containers he had collected in his room. Apparently, he consumes cannabis edibles and is too afraid to leave, so he uses those instead. I asked, are they at least capped? He just shrugged and said, no. A different story, but the same man. He also told me about his fingernail and toenail table that needed to be vacuumed because there was no more room left on it. Story 21. A friend from work told me he has not brushed his teeth since he turned 18. I did not need him to tell me because all of his teeth are black. Story 22. He had never experienced this before. It is a fairly recent occurrence. A man I know was in rehabilitation for alcoholism. He has been sober for over 60 days now, and I am really proud of him. However, he also had a very poor diet. He followed a diet that excluded vegetables. He had a very large and hard bowel movement and was unable to push it out. He resorted to physically removing it with his fingers, which ultimately caused him to have an anal prolapse. Instead of seeking medical help, he tries to push his anus back in himself every time he showers. He has improved his diet now. I do not know if he has received treatment for his condition. Story 23. Worked with a man who had false teeth. He would eat Oreos and, when finished, take out his dentures and lick them to get all of the cream filling and chocolate off. He also read many Western novels with his feet propped up on the desk. Then he would pick his nose, roll the boogers between his index finger and thumb, and when they were dry enough, flick them across the room. You could hear them click when they hit the wall. Story 24. Okay, she did not tell me she did it. I saw it with my own eyes. My mother would blow her nose into her hand and lick up the mucus. I never ate anything she cooked ever again. Story 25. A friend of mine makes Cheez-It sandwiches. where he chews up a Cheez-It and places it between two other Cheez-Its. He claims chewing one up adds to the flavor, and the varying textures add complexity. Story 26. An old friend of mine recently told me he stopped brushing his teeth because of the chemicals. The guy's tongue looks unhealthy. Very gross. Story 27. They do not clean up cat vomit. Instead, they let their dog eat it. That was until the dog was too old to hear the cat throw up. When that happened, they simply led the dog to the cat vomit and had the dog eat it then. Story 28. A former friend of my wife is a server and bartender. She openly admitted to never washing her hands after using the restroom. I have not eaten there since. Story 29. My friend openly makes out with her dog, using an open mouth and tongue, which is disgusting. She has sent me videos of it. She also has mental health issues. Story 30. Well, my dad didn't openly tell me, but he had a collection of his fingernails on the driver's side floor of his car. I happened upon it once. Story 31. Asked a friend's white housemate of Northern European descent if she was Hindu, as she was wearing a brownish-red bindi in the middle of her forehead. She was not. It was her own menstrual blood. She said she did it as a personal ritual and something about keeping in touch with the miracle of the goddess within. From then on, we referred to her, not to her face, as menstrual bindi. Story 32. Buddy had some strange black lumps on his wall. Another friend asked him what they were. In confidence, Buddy once said he picks his earwax out and smears it onto the wall. It was unpleasant and had been there for a long time. Story 33. Wow. This thread is making me realize that I am actually quite normal, and I am amazed by some of these answers. Story 34. A customer at my work once told me that he does not shower unless someone mentions how bad he smells. Like what? Story 35. Had a coworker swear the best way to beat jet lag is to walk around barefoot on the plane and in the airport when you arrive. I mentioned this to our boss, and he told me he had seen him do it at Los Angeles International Airport. Story 36. My ex used to finish on the floor beside his bed. He had carpet flooring. I asked him why his floor was crunchy. Story 37. Hi. My dad used to have irritable bowel syndrome and would keep toilet paper in his truck. If he had a disaster involving bowel movements, he would quickly pull over to the nearest enclosed dumpster, run behind it, and relieve himself. Sometimes you could hear the impact against the side of the dumpster from the truck. This happened for approximately 9 years until he eventually improved his diet. Could happen at any time. For example, if it was your birthday and you were on your way to celebrate, you had to hold on tight because he might need to pull over for 10 minutes while he relieved himself behind a random dumpster. Then we could celebrate. Story 38. An old coworker said he would ejaculate into a shot glass every morning and drink it to have a good protein intake. He was 62 years old and quite eccentric. Story 39. I had a roommate who kept her toothbrush on the floor of the shower. Our other roommate was disgusted and bought a toothbrush holder for her. My complex replaced all the carpets in the first floor units last year. The woman below me said she was thankful to get rid of them because they smelled like her dog's urine. She admitted to not taking the dog outside or cleaning the urine. Some coworkers noticed the man who collected the biomedical waste and sharp bins at work would use the bathroom while wearing his gloves. Whenever he asked us to sign for the pickup or drop-off, we let him keep the pens. Thankfully, we have since switched companies. Story 40. I had an acquaintance who openly admitted, even bragged, that she collected a bucket of menstrual blood in her closet for a year. She soaked clothing in it and would wear it unwashed and decaying. Story 41. My ex had several unpleasant habits. The main one was his blanket. It was an old-style cloth diaper with fabric sewn to the back to make it sturdier. He had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and would fidget with it until it fell apart. He would blow his nose on it, wipe blood or food on it, rub his hands and face with it, and more. Could never be washed because he said he loved the smell of it. It smelled terrible and could be detected from across the room once it was soiled. After he realized I did not make a fuss about it, he would bring it out in front of company, no matter who. Story 42. The man said he uses the same pair of socks for days because they air out overnight. I have never felt such discomfort mentally. Story 43. Our colleague at work has been going to the bathroom for years and defecating in a small cosmetic tissue bag, which he then takes straight to his car and puts in the trunk. He wants to hide it. Everyone knows about it, but no one has ever asked why he does it. Interestingly, his car does not smell like feces. Story 44. I knew a man in the military who said he would wrap toilet paper around his finger and insert it up to the second knuckle to clean himself after using the bathroom. After that, everyone called him Knuckles. Story 45. A former friend liked to get his nails very dirty, especially underneath, and then suck on them. I found out about it when we were at a movie, and he began sucking and chewing his nails. When I asked him why he was doing that, he explained in full detail. I started gagging, and even now the memory makes me gag, so I left the movie early. I have not talked to him since. Story 46. Not regularly, but in high school we had a kid transfer from the other high school in town. I would play Magic, the Gathering with him, but not much else. He walked into the lunchroom and told a girl at my table that he was happy to meet her because he had just had a sexual dream about her the night before. He was not allowed to sit and did not come back. Weeks later, I found out he was not transferred. He was expelled from the other school. He had threatened the vice principal with bringing a shotgun. Many years later, after graduation, I learned that he tried to kill his father and went to prison. That is all I know now. Story 47. Met a guy in college who had a unique preference and finally found a girl on campus willing to share it with him. She happened to be the most unhygienic female I had ever come across who was not homeless. Someone known around campus for being smelled before being seen. Then again, so was he, so naturally they were a perfect match. His preference was that he liked to suck on her heavily used tampons. He would openly talk about this with people as if it were an everyday thing. Story 48. I have helped a friend move several times. His family does not use sheets. They have had the same mattresses for years without sheets. The two children sleep on the couch because they do not like their beds. The couch is not much better. Story 49. Does it count if it was about someone else? My ex, about 20 years ago, told me that about 7 years prior to that, when he started in the military, there was a woman in his basic training they referred to as Bixby. She would use the business end of an unfolded paper clip to dig at all the whiteheads, which are large pimples, on her face. She did this openly, surrounded by the rest of her unit, often during meetings when nobody could escape. She would eat what she scraped off. The way the superior attempted to deal with it, because apparently she was a great soldier, was to stop speaking and stare at her, as well as encourage everyone else to do the same. This had zero effect in getting her to stop. Story 50. I was not told this. It was actually me. At a very dark time in my life, several times in fact, I was severely depressed and mentally ill to the point where I neglected almost all hygiene and stayed in bed for extended periods. The worst it ever got was when I spent a month just bedridden, during which my hair became tangled, and my pads were not changed until they developed a foul smell and turned green. Fortunately, I am okay now. I still struggle with mental and physical issues such as teeth grinding, lack of sleep, and depression. However, since getting a job, I have been able to work, maintain cleanliness, and pay close attention to showering, smelling nice, and brushing my hair and teeth. My hair is mostly healthy and has grown longer. I refuse to take long vacations because I return to staying in bed. I need routine and structure. Story 51. The number of people I have encountered over the last decade who confirm that they do not wash their legs or feet is not large, but it is alarming. Story 52. I am a server. My coworker came back to her shift and said, "I hate pretending to use soap to wash my hands." I asked her what she meant because I didn't think I heard her right. She said it again. Do you know how many dishes I have shared with her? Story 53. A woman I used to share a house with in college was very open about having herpes. She kept a list of all the men she had unprotected sex with and gave herpes to, including a man who became her boyfriend. She then had sex with his best friend, and the best friend's girlfriend also contracted herpes. She would boast about all the men she infected, something like 76 in a year, I think. I was shocked. She was a nightmare. Story 54. There was a coworker in the office who had allergies and was always sneezing. He constantly blew his nose into the same white handkerchief. When it became soaked, he hung it on the front of his desk fan to dry so he could reuse it. I felt disgusted whenever I saw it flapping around. Story 55. I used to work in retail. Luckily, I didn't personally experience this, but one day I came in for my shift, and the team had discovered a used tampon in the dressing room earlier in the day. On a separate note, I also used to work in property management and once had a mother and son come for an apartment showing. I could smell them as soon as they opened the door. It was a mix of body odor, mildew, urine, and dog. They were older, the mother must have been in her mid-70s or at least looked that age, and the son was likely in his 50s. As they sat across from me, a bed bug crawled from inside the mother's coat up towards her hair. As gross as it was also sad. She was working as a home health aide for even older people, and he seemed to have a mental disability. We had an issue with hoarders in the community, and they had the same atmosphere and odor. They were people who definitely needed help and a shower. Story 56. When I was a child, my friend and I went to the bathroom on a school trip. While I was washing my hands, she said to me, "Oh, I do not believe in doing that." About 5 minutes later, she offered me some chips and was surprised when I declined. This happened well over 10 years ago, and it still lives rent-free in my mind. Story 57. An intern at my work said she never washed her feet. She just assumed the soap running down in the shower took care of it. She defended herself strongly. The next day, she said she asked her family at dinner if you were supposed to wash your feet, and they all looked at her in horror. Story 58. I had a friend who wondered what it would feel like to soil himself. He got out wearing tighty-whitey underwear and stepped into the shower. He soiled himself in the shower. He came out with a strange look on his face and said it did not feel like he thought it would. You do some unusual things in the military when you are bored. Story 59. I work in nursing homes. I had a patient, an older gentleman, who told me he masturbates every night, puts it in a cup, and pours it in his coffee in the morning to increase his virility. Story 60. My ex was involved with another man who was hit by a car on a public street and died. She went to the funeral and hugged his wife. Not as disturbing as some other stories, but still quite upsetting. She now posts on Reddit blaming everything on me. Story 61. A friend of mine told me he has a tapeworm. He does not bother to remove it, but instead, he says he plays with the head when it comes out in the late evenings. Story 62. The girl I knew would reuse menstrual pads because college is expensive and everyone is trying to survive. Story 63. My ex would create what he called a manpon. He would get a paper towel and fold it several times lengthwise. He would stick it between his buttocks to soak up sweat. He only did this at home, but I would see paper towels sticking out of his pants while he was playing video games. Then he would remove it and not throw it away. I would find these manpons on his desk. Is this something people do? Story 64. An old coworker said they did not check the toilet paper after wiping following a bowel movement. They would just guess when to stop. She would always say her skin was itchy. Story 65. I knew a man who admitted he did not clean himself after using the restroom because he believed that was inappropriate and that underwear was for that purpose. Story 66. Worked with a woman who would dig her fingers in her ears and scrape the earwax off with her teeth. Just thinking about it is gag-inducing. Went to school with a girl who ate the acne scabs she picked off the pimples on her face. I almost threw up when I saw her do that. Story 67. I was not told exactly by the person, as I witnessed it myself. My brother once had milk in his room that was so old it curdled into cheese, and he actually tried to eat a piece. He is not allowed to have anything but water in his room after the first incident happened multiple times, with other drinks growing mold and such. This is not as gross as some of the other repulsive things here, but I thought I would share my experience. Story 68. Maybe not the grossest, but it is what I can remember. A client recently told me she literally sits on her hands in public restrooms because she does not want her butt to touch the seat. It may have partially broken my brain. Yes, you wash your hands, but the idea of putting my hands on the toilet seat is wild to me. Plus, she is not the slimmest little old lady. For sure, the backs of her thighs and but touched the seat anyway. This all came up because she was telling me it is difficult to get off the toilet because she is sitting on her hands. I think about it every time I use the work restroom now. Story 69. In middle school, I was sitting on my friend's bed having a chat when she pulled out her tampon and threw it behind her bed. She laughed. I was horrified. Apparently, she had a small pile of used tampons back there. Story 70. My ex's family never closed the bathroom door when they used it. It did not matter if they were showering or using the toilet. Story 71. My mother rarely showers or cleans her room. Her bed smells like unwashed skin, and she has an unpleasant odor. Her toenails are long and unclean. My grandmother is the same way. It is disgusting. Story 72. I knew a man who said he would not wash between his buttocks because he believed it was not a place a straight man should be touching. He was 6 feet 5 inches tall, always been a little heavy, and smelled somewhat musty. I thought it was just sweat. But, Story 73. My college roommate used to get large blisters on his feet from playing ultimate frisbee. One day, he peeled off a giant flap of skin and tacked it to the ceiling above his bed. Once it dried, he took it down and ate it right in front of me. He said it had the texture of munchos. If you read this, Andy, I have not forgotten about this unpleasant incident. Story 74. A friend of my father will share an ice cream cone with his dog. He will lick it right after his dog licked it. I am an animal lover myself, but this made me feel sick. Story 75. A boyfriend ate his nasal mucus. I know it is more common than people think, and I know those who eat nasal mucus are reading this. Story 76. I had a coworker who would masturbate in our back storeroom and let his semen fly all over the back wall. He was very inappropriate. He also masturbated at his desk and would ejaculate on the bottom of his desk. When he was fired, we threw everything away. Story 77. When I was an escort, I received many odd requests and confessions. My all-time favorite disgusting confession and request was a man looking for someone inexperienced to drive nails through his shaft and testicles. Not just a few, but several dozen, literally covering them entirely in nails. I kept denying that service because, first, it was repulsive, and second, no amount of money could convince me to do that. Out of curiosity, I asked him what part of that he enjoyed. He said he enjoyed the healing process. I cringe at the thought. Story 78. The United States Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, openly admits, even brags, that he never washes his hands because he cannot see germs, and therefore they must not exist. Story 79. I had a boyfriend whose old roommate would put ketchup directly on the coffee table, eat his food, and leave it there. He did not understand the problem. Story 80. There was a guy in my high school who openly discussed how he would try to molest his adopted sister, who was his first cousin. Story 81. A man once told me he only washes his bed sheets once a year because they will just get dirty again. I actually gagged a little. Story 82. I know a man who has openly claimed he would have inappropriate relations with his daughter if she were not his daughter. This same man has openly bragged about sexually assaulting and raping women. Many young women have come forward stating they were raped by him, including a 13-year-old. Many of you may know him as well. Story 83. My coworker told me he leaves his bag of garbage out for his dog to dig through inside his house when he is at work. Story 84. I was getting a tattoo, and this man admitted he openly engages in sexual activities with girls in nightclubs in Orlando, even if they only appear to be 18 years old. This is insane. Story 85. I have a few stories. A housemate once told me he doesn't use a fitted sheet and just sleeps naked directly on the mattress. I was grossed out because he was borrowing my spare mattress. I met a guy who would bite his toenails off instead of using clippers or anything else besides his mouth. This is probably the worst one. A person who was going to a local convention I also attend was found to draw baby and child characters with bestiality, scat, and gore. Worse yet, they wanted to sell this art at the convention. They were 25 years old, dressed like a child, and even had a pacifier they would suck on. Story 86. Kept leeches in their mouth while ice fishing. He said the fish would go for them immediately when they were warm. He also told me that ice fishermen defecate directly into the lake, which made me wonder if the fish ate that right away too since they like warm things so much. The whole conversation was unpleasant, and I no longer want to eat fish caught in the winter. Story 87. My friend and her husband do not have designated toothbrushes. They brush with whichever one they pick up. Story 88. I worked in a hospital. A colleague from the emergency room told me that if he had a cute patient, he would copy her data to his phone to stalk her on social media and then randomly bump into her, like checking where she would go for her morning runs. Obviously, I would check for serious diseases first. I am not crazy. Dude, you are a creep. When we had new nurses, he sometimes showed up at their homes because he was in the neighborhood. He was put on gardening leave, fully paid but not allowed on the hospital grounds, until his trial, after he followed a young woman to her car and stopped her from closing the door because he had to make clear that she is a perfect match. Story 89. Bite their toenail and just chew it in their mouth. I have seen him doing it multiple times, and it is disgusting. Story 90. There was a lady at my job. I was working at a call center for an insurance company. Every day, let's call her Doris for the sake of anonymity, she would bring in a giant bag of peanut butter pretzels and a liter of off-brand cola. She ate that at her desk and chewed loudly. She also passed gas quite often. One day, Doris said that the doctor told her she needed more calcium but she didn't like milk, so instead of drinking milk, she would chew her fingernails and toenails. She took off her shoes and clipped her nails. Keep in mind we were in an open office which we called the bullpen, and she clipped continuously. She munched on her nails between bites of pretzels and sips of soda. Talk about gross. Story 91. She found an old bag of breast milk in the back of her freezer. She had stopped pumping almost 3 years before this, and she did not want it to go to waste, so she just tossed it into the brownie mix she was making for her family. Needless to say, I never really ate food she made after that. Story 92. I had a friend who told me he regularly had dreams about Oprah engaging with him intimately, but I guess that was not something he consciously chose to do. Story 93. I have a coworker who refuses to clean himself properly. No wiping, no bidet, no soap, nothing. He does not want anything near that area because of personal reasons. Story 94. He does not tell me, he just does it in front of me. He digs and scratches at his testicles and then sniffs his fingers. He does not wash his hands afterward or anything. Story 95. Not gross per se, but instead concerning. A no longer friend told me their hypersexuality gives them constant thoughts of assaulting people. They told me this, and I am a survivor of assault, by the way. That is what ended the friendship. I could not stand the thought that they could be thinking of doing that to anyone, including me. Story 96. A friend of mine used to say that he regularly pulled dried feces from his anus, stuck to his hair. He did not realize the reason was poor hygiene and inadequate wiping. This still haunts me to this day. Story 97. He did not tell me. I witnessed it. But my ex, when he took a bowel movement, would stand to wipe and just smear it all over his groin until it disappeared. He also only showered on Sundays despite working a very physical job and would not wear deodorant because he read it causes cancer. I pretty much stopped touching him after I saw how he wiped. He almost got fired a couple of times because of how bad he smelled. Story 98. I discovered that my friend, who is female, does not wipe after urinating. She just gets up and moves on with her day. Story 99. I used to spend the night at one of my friend's houses when I was in middle school and early high school. He would spit on his floor. Also, when I was lying on the floor trying to sleep, he told me he masturbates and rubs semen on the side of his mattress. I looked at the mattress and he was not joking. The kid came from a pretty troubled family. He had to live with his grandmother because his father was a pedophile, and I think his mother died of a drug overdose. The only somewhat normal people in his family were his grandmother, his sister, and stepbrother, at least out of the 10 I had met. I kept spending the night there because sometimes I was so high I did not want to go home. Plus, he was my friend, and we could basically do whatever we wanted. At that age, I could not stand being alone with my own thoughts, so I would always be out somewhere. Story 100. In college, my roommate loved to go fishing and would even bring home fish he found dead. He once brought home a fish he found on the side of the road. Story 101. I had a friend openly admit to our group that when she used to have sex with her ex, they would take off the used condom afterward and throw it behind the television. Story 102. Can I self-report? Thankfully, not regularly at this point in my life, but I have many times gone more than a month without showing signs. I quite often deal with depression that makes self-care go out the window, and also have time blindness from something along the lines of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or autism that is not diagnosed. Combining the two, "I'll do it tomorrow" goes on for way too long without me actually processing how long it has been. Though I must have an extremely low amount of body odor because I have somehow never heard a comment or even seen a reaction from someone who would have no reason to worry about upsetting me. None of my friends, who I know would say something or at least ask, "Hey, are you doing okay?" have mentioned anything, which genuinely amazes and confuses me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.